After Hong Kong, London, and Tokyo, Vancouver is considered to have the most expensive real estate in the world. What does this mean for residents of Vancouver? They live in the suburbs, they commute to the city for work. How taxing is this on the system? In terms of transit, what are the options that are available? Is there congestion with traffic? All the services seem to be overflowing. Here to talk to us about this in studio today is Mayor Greg Moore, who is the mayor of the city of Port Coquitlam. He's also the chairman of the Metro Vancouver board. Let's talk to him and find out a little bit more about what the possible solutions are for us and our families. Mayor Moore, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So I know that you're the mayor of the city of Port Coquitlam. It's one of the Tri-Cities, or one of the cities within the Tri-Cities, but it's the one that people don't necessarily talk about. So tell us a little bit about the city of Port Coquitlam and how that fits into the greater Vancouver area.
So Port Coquitlam is located in the northeast sector of Metro Vancouver, between Coquitlam and Pitt Meadows, and borders the Pitt River and the Fraser River. We're 58,000 people, so we're a fair-sized community, and people love Port Coquitlam because we're set within the nature. We're surrounded by rivers, next to the mountains, but we have a small-town charm about us. We have a cute, quaint downtown that was built 100 years ago, but there's also a variety of employment, but also housing. So there's affordability for housing and different types of housing. We're connected to the city of Vancouver, so people, like you mentioned, can go to work by the West Coast Express. It's a 35-minute transit ride into Vancouver so they can go to work. So, I think we're a great little community that's perfectly situated within the metro landscape.
So do you find that people prefer to live in the suburbs just because of housing prices? Let's talk about that.
I think with the Metro Vancouver, we have choice, right? We can live in downtown Vancouver, and it's very expensive, as you mentioned, like a 500,000 square foot condo, for like $600,000, which is really expensive.
Crazy, yeah.
But, some people might choose the location, or you could come to a community like Port Coquitlam, where you could get a single family home for $600,000. And now that's a choice people have to make. There's pros and cons to both of them. But at least within this region, we have choice based on affordability, location, and what your needs are at a certain point in your life.
So is the quality of living better in the suburbs? Because you're surrounded, like you said, you can afford a single family home for the same price as you would a 5,000 or 500 square foot condo in downtown, but you're surrounded by amenities. You've got walking distance to parks and community centers and gyms and this type of thing. So how do is this what residents want? Is that community living?
Well, I think, we've got 2.4 million people that live in Metro Vancouver. You'd probably get 2.4 million different answers on why people live in certain locations, right? And we know there's, Port Coquitlam, for example, we have one of the lowest average ages in all of BC.
Really?
So that means we have a family population, right? So the average age is just around 40 years old. Which means there's usually at that age you have kids, so it's a very family-oriented community. You might choose to live somewhere else when you're an empty nester, or when you're young and you just get out of high school, you might be living near a university, and then you stay in the Kits area or something like that. So, I think what's great about around this region is there is choice, and based on where you are in your life, where you are with family and other things, it might be where you live.
So in terms of the commute, let's talk about that. So, obviously living in the suburbs means that you have to travel a little bit further to get to where you need to be, whether that's crossing a bridge, taking a highway, or something like that. There has been expansion with the highway systems. You've got to get from that corridor, right? From Maple Ridge, Port Coquitlam, Tri-Cities area, you can either go Lougheed Highway, Highway 1 through the new expansion, or you have the Maryhill bypass. But in terms of congestion, that has opened it up. Do you think that that's going to slowly plug up as the increase in population?
Yeah, one of our challenges within the region is, many cities, and where Vancouver used to be, it was like a spoke. Everything went to the hub, which was the city of Vancouver. But now we have a lot of employment throughout the region. So we see a lot of our traffic patterns moving throughout the region. So for example, the new Highway 1 and the new Port Mann Bridge, 30% of the traffic on the bridge gets on at 152nd in Surrey and gets off at the Coquitlam interchange. or vice versa.
Oh, wow.
Right? So it's going from Surrey to the northeast sector and back and
Right.
forth. So, the Golden Ears Bridge is a prime example of that as well, that it's not anything to head into Vancouver, it's connecting the suburbs together.
Right.
So that's one of our challenges, delivering not only a road network, but also a transit system, is that if everybody was just going to downtown Vancouver, that's pretty easy. But since they're going throughout the region and at different times of the day, it makes it just that much more complex to deliver a comprehensive solution to everyone.
So what about the commuting options? I mean, we all know that the transit plebiscite was, we all know the result of that. And, the Evergreen line that is coming into Coquitlam doesn't come beyond that, to cover Port Coquitlam and beyond. Maple Ridge is a huge community that is massively growing. What are the options for people?
So we went through this, over the last year or 2 years, we've gone through quite an exercise, a public exercise. The first thing that we did was the mayors from around the region came and developed a plan. That was the plan that we voted on. Then we developed a question. And remember, this is something that the mayors in the region didn't think was appropriate. It was to go to a plebiscite to make such an important policy decision on how it affects the livability of this region. But we went through that process. And so we went through a plebiscite, and we don't have to live through that again, hopefully. And we weren't successful. But there was two things that I think there was a few things that were really came clear. One, people understand that we're growing, right? We're growing by 1 million people over the next 25 years, and they're growing all around this region. A bulk of them are going to be south of the Fraser, but my community is going to go from 58,000 to 84,000 people in that same period, right? So we're growing. So people accepted that we're growing. They also accepted that this plan is the right plan to deliver the transportation solutions that we need to address current day congestion as well as future congestion. So people, I think, had a challenge with TransLink and some of the operations of TransLink, and government, you should find money somewhere else, those sort of things. But the growth and the plan, I think, were well established, and now we need to figure out a way how we can move forward to implement those.
So you did mention that there's 1 million people that are going to be coming into the city and the surrounding area within the next 10 years. So we're just going to take a short break here, and when we come back, let's talk about how those, all those additional people, those additional bodies, the services that they're going to be using, how that's going to be affected.
ਘਰ ਇੱਕ ਐਸੀ ਥਾਂ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਹੈ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਹਰ ਕੋਈ ਆਪਣੀ ਨਿੱਜੀ ਜ਼ਿੰਦਗੀ ਦੇ ਸੁਨਹਿਰੀ ਪਲ ਯਾਦ ਰੱਖਦਾ ਹੈ। ਉਹ ਜਗ੍ਹਾ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਉਹ ਰਹਿੰਦਾ ਹੈ ਤੇ ਪਿਆਰ ਭਰਿਆ ਜੀਵਨ ਬਤੀਤ ਕਰਦਾ ਹੈ। ਇਹ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਤਾਂ ਹੀ ਪੂਰੀਆਂ ਹੁੰਦੀਆਂ ਨੇ ਜਦ ਕਿਸੇ ਜਗ੍ਹਾ ਨੂੰ ਸਜੇ ਹੋਏ ਘਰ 'ਚ ਬਦਲਿਆ ਜਾਵੇ। ਨਵੇਂ ਘਰਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਫਰੇਮਿੰਗ ਤੋਂ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਫਿਨਿਸ਼ਿੰਗ ਤੱਕ, ਡ੍ਰੇਪਰੀ, ਪੇਂਟਿੰਗਸ ਤੋਂ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਡੈਕੋਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਅਸੈਸਰੀਜ਼ ਤੱਕ, ਤੁਸੀਂ SK ਹੋਮ ਡਿਜ਼ਾਈਨਸ ਦੀਆਂ ਪ੍ਰੋਫੈਸ਼ਨਲ ਸਰਵਿਸਿਜ਼ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਸੁਪਨਿਆਂ ਦੇ ਘਰ ਨੂੰ ਹਕੀਕਤ 'ਚ ਬਦਲ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ। ਕੰਟੈਕਟ ਕਰੋ ਸੰਦੀਪ ਕੌਰ 6048259295।
Thanks for staying with us. We were speaking with Mayor Greg Moore, who's the mayor of the city of Port Coquitlam, as well as the chair of Metro Vancouver. Let's find out a little bit more about Metro Vancouver and how they help us as residents of this region. So, Mayor Moore, tell us a little bit more about the services that Metro Vancouver actually helps us with.
Yeah, Metro Vancouver is one of those organizations that people kind of hear about. They more know as GVRD, because that was what. And so Metro Vancouver has been around for 100 years, just over 100 years, delivering sewer, water services, as well as waste management services. So every time you turn that tap on, that's Metro Vancouver delivering the water. Every time you have a shower or flush the toilet, we take it away and we clean it up and we make sure that it's clean when we put it back in the environment. But we also do more. We manage air quality within this region.
Right.
We also have a regional park service where we have Metro Vancouver parks throughout the region, where we have about 9 million people go to our parks every year.
Wow.
We're also a large housing provider. We provide subsidized and co-op housing throughout the region for 4,500 people every month. In this region. We're the second biggest housing provider in BC, next to BC Housing. So, but what we really do behind delivering those services is we bring everyone together. So we have a board of 38 locally elected people from around Metro Vancouver. We deliver our utility services. We have policies on urban planning, so we have a regional growth strategy to make sure that all of the municipalities within Metro Vancouver are working together on how we're growing, so that one municipality isn't growing in concert with the others. And then finally, we're a political body. You bring that many politicians together, we're going to have opinions about political issues, whether we can control them or not. We're a voice for that larger Metro Vancouver regional political discussion.
So speaking on the political side of things, I mean, you mentioned that there is a regional growth strategy. So when, and you also mentioned earlier on that you're expecting approximately 1 million additional residents to settle within this region. So, I mean, obviously that's taxing on the systems. I'm assuming that there is a strategy in place where you're working towards that. But when all the, the heads of the various different cities get together, I mean, is crime not one of those issues that is on the table? Do you discuss that?
Yeah, crime is an interesting one because there's we have different jurisdictions around here. So many of us are on RCMP, but you've got Vancouver, West Vancouver, Delta, Port Moody, New Westminster on city police. And so we have some integrated teams throughout the region. So the integrated homicide team, IHIT, a traffic team, a dog team, an emergency response team. Those are all in RCMP jurisdictions. And then city police jurisdictions can choose to opt in or not. And so there's not necessarily an integrated unit throughout the whole Lower Mainland for some of these higher crime. The gang task force, for example, is a regional one because it was a provincial government mandated task force. Whereas IHIT, it's some are in and some aren't. And so there causes some challenges there.
I mean, why is that? I mean, like, as a resident, something happens, I dial 911, I expect to get the police. Well, I wouldn't necessarily know that the police are different in each jurisdiction. Or let's say if something happens in one municipality, I can't cross over. It's why don't they communicate? And
for you don't care. You call 911, you want a police officer. You don't care what the badge on the shoulder says. You want that. And I think that happens, right? So that part of the system works well. And they do communicate in the background. They have a system called Prime that every police officer uses in this province. So they're sharing data in the background. But if you have a murder that happens in Vancouver, that's their investigation team that's going to look after it. But if you had a murder that happens right next door in Burnaby, that's IHIT that's going to look after it. Now, I know they cooperate and they discuss, but having, I think, on some of these integrated teams, having it forced throughout the region so that you had integrated teams throughout the whole region, I think would be a better way to go. And then when you take it down to the cop walking the beat and in your local community, then as local communities, we can determine our service level. Do we want to have 2 police officers on every corner, or are we okay that they're driving around and policing in a different manner? That can be a Port Coquitlam decision, or a Surrey decision, or a Vancouver decision. But the integrated, the crime that doesn't care about boundaries can be controlled by a regional governance perspective.
So if all of you are getting together on a board to discuss these major issues that affect residents within the region, I mean, wouldn't it make sense to have some sort of a cohesive unit just for policing so that it's not separated?
Yeah, and the mayors think so, absolutely. And we've made that position. We don't have the authority to do it. Right, so the Police Act, the provincial government. The Police Act is determined by the provincial government, and so we do not have the authority. Although we've said that should occur. So if you look at right now, you have RCMP that has a hierarchy back to Ottawa. We have good interaction as local mayors with our officer in charge. That's like our police chief. And but city police, they have their own board of directors that are appointed by the provincial government, and the mayor is the chair. You have these integrated teams throughout the region that are governed by RCMP, but no local politician is on that. You have the TransLink police that also have their own appointed board made up of different police officers. You have all of these different governance structures, bodies sometimes working together, sometimes looking after their own silo. And I think,
so
you need to...
Is that effective, or are things falling through the cracks? Because it seems like things are falling through the cracks.
Yeah, and we probably can find examples of things falling through the cracks. I think generally, they're all working together and they've got common working groups in the background. But I think it's not that it's not working. I think there's just a better way to do it. And I think that's the discussion that we have to have. And that has to be a participation from local government, which I think is more than willing to have that conversation and has started to. But we need to have the provincial government to be a part of that conversation as well.
So, I mean, you just mentioned several forms of government. So you've got municipal, you've got provincial, you have federal. How do we get them to sit at the same table and make these types of decisions so that residents don't, residents are covered?
Yeah, and we do our best without that, right? I'm not sure what the answer, to be honest, I'm not sure what that answer is, right? Because if you have the federal government and it's the Treasury Board of the federal government that looks after the RCMP and the RCMP contract. So in fact, they'll make a decision in Ottawa about the pay increase for RCMP or the pension plan or the health benefits.
Right.
As a local RCMP community, I just have to pay. I'm not at that, and I get that all of us can't be there, because you think of all the communities across Canada that are serviced by the RCMP, that's pretty big. But even so, I think there has to be a different way that we can be a part of those discussions and look for solutions here locally, even if we just determine that RCMP is the right service model for us. We need to be able to figure out how to integrate the city police and the RCMP together on some of these issues, because you look at some of the crime that's happening in different communities, and IHIT is investigating in some of them, and sometimes it's not.
Right.
And so therefore you got two groups, and it might be a gang thing, so they got to bring in the gang task force now, and it seems like it just could be done better.
A lot more bureaucracy behind it, I guess.
Yeah.
Or like red tape, I guess.
Yeah, and I think there's efficiencies that we could find there.
Right. So there's no instant solution. I guess the conversation is being had, and hopefully it will continue, so that way residents will feel like politicians are working in our best interest.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other part about the integrated teams that works really well is, like IHIT, for example, the integrated homicide team. They become experts in homicides, right? So in Port Coquitlam, knock on wood, we haven't had a murder for many, many, many years.
Okay, that's
right?
a good thing.
That's a really good thing. But if we do, IHIT comes in, they bring all their experts in and are able to solve those murders usually really quick. Whereas with us, since we don't have too many, if we had to do it ourselves, we'd be like pulling out the playbook of, okay, what do we do for this type of investigation, because we don't do it all the time.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Mayor Moore, for joining us and for starting to have these conversations within our own households. I do appreciate you coming out.